We will now begin Urban Development Session 2, Urban Development and Area Management. And we want to look into the future of cities by looking at specific examples of London and New York City. I would like to first talk about Tokyo. There are three things. Analysis of Tokyo's urban power. Second, future projects in the central Tokyo. The urban development projects in Tokyo, which are to take place. And finally, but not the least, area revitalization efforts. In terms of urban power, yesterday there was a press announcement regarding the Global Power City Index. Three things. GPCI, and second is the GPICI, which is the Global Power Inner City Index, and the Global Power Metropolitan Area Index, GPMAI. And we are looking at the urban power of Tokyo based on those three. GPICI, Global Power Inner City Index. Well, GPCI is an annual ranking, whereas GPICI is measured once every 5 years. In December of this year, you will see the details. And today, I'd like to share with you what we already know about GPICI. How do we measure the power of inner cities? Actually, when we look at the inner city power within 5-kilometer and 10-kilometer radiuses, you can get the basic picture. London, Paris, Seoul, Tokyo, Shanghai, Hong Kong, Singapore, and New York. These are the areas in which we have already done the analysis. And the indicators used were in 6 groups: vitality, culture, interactivity, sense of luxury, amenities, and mobility. These 6 groups of indicators are used to measure the inner city, and there are 20 indicators used altogether. And here are some of the results. The power of corporations of Fortune 500 companies. We looked at where the headquarters are located amongst the top 500 companies, and we find that Tokyo is an overwhelming number 1 in both the 5-kilometer and 10-kilometer range, mostly within the 5-kilometer range. So we see a very high concentration, and these are the actual locations in Tokyo, around the Imperial Palace and Shinjuku. In New York, Midtown and Lower Manhattan are where the concentrations are. In London, some of the inner cities, and some East End and West End. Those are the locations of the top companies. What about top restaurants? Tokyo, again, is overwhelmingly strong. For some strange reason, Michelin loves Tokyo. We're using Michelin in other source. The world 50 best restaurants. A UK source is used here. And you can see that Tokyo is an overwhelming number 1. And these are the locations of the restaurants. Diverse. 5-kilometer, 10-kilometer range, whereas in New York, the southern half of Manhattan, London, mostly in inner cities, but there is a spread eastward and westward as well. Very similar to what we already know. What about theaters, concert halls? And this is where Tokyo lags behind. New York is number 1, followed by London, and then Paris. Tokyo is weak in this particular category. In the GPCI, it's already pointed out that Tokyo is weak in cultural art activities, and that's been underlined here or underscored here. And this is the location. In the case of New York, mostly southern half of Manhattan. Tokyo, very diverse. London, mostly in the center. But again, we see an even distribution throughout the city. And GPCI, the weakness is the transportation access. Tokyo, New York, London, international airports with more than 1 million takeoffs and landings per year are being used. See how close they are or far they are from the cities, as well as the number of flights. In London, there are 5, Tokyo 2, New York 3 airports altogether, and this is the result. Shanghai, Seoul, we don't have the data, so we're going to eliminate this. New York, London, Tokyo, when we compare those, we find that New York is number 1. So all these different types of data, 20 indicators altogether, when they are summed up, what's the result? Okay, so 20 indicators are color-coded, and you do the weighting, and you add up. And within the 5-kilometer range, Hong Kong is number 1, which is noteworthy. 2 years ago, Hong Kong was not number 1, it was Paris. But this time, Hong Kong is number 1, Tokyo is number 2. What about within the 10-kilometer range? Tokyo, number 1, followed by Paris. So GPCI top ranking cities, London and New York are not 1 and 2, interestingly. And when you put all of these together, the situation of agglomeration, this is what you get. So this is the results of the analysis of the inner cities today. So the question is, how would the inner city change over time? We're going to have presentations later, but I'd like to talk about Tokyo and look at the future of Tokyo. In 2020s, how would Tokyo look like? We are using the publicly available data and drew the picture. In 2020, Tokyo Paralympic Olympics, and then there are many infrastructure development projects completed. Otemachi first. Otemachi Marunouchi, you see the Imperial Palace on the foreground, and we see more buildings. So we see a continuous development, or chain development in English. And then eastward, Nihonbashi, Yaesu, Kyobashi area. Here again, there are many development projects that have already started. And Tokiwabashi, 400-meter high building is to be completed. That's already been announced. So within the Tokyo Station area, many projects are already underway. 2020, 2025, almost all will be completed. And last year, Toranomon Hills opened in the Toranomon area. Here again, many projects are currently underway. And in the mid-2020s, they all should be completed. From Toranomon Hills towards the Bay Area, Shiodome, Shimbashi, and Toranomon. This avenue is called Shin-Tora Avenue. The project is, or the idea is to make this a Champs-Élysées of Tokyo, very daring. Shibuya area, big, gigantic redevelopment efforts underway, and multiple high-rise office buildings and residential buildings are to be constructed. And this is the Bay Area, Toyosu Harumi Ariake area. And for the Olympic Games, the athletic village, athletes village, and some of the venues are to be built. So over the next 10, 15 years, those are the plans. So based on what I just showed you, we are going to now look at some of the symbolic projects. First, Marunouchi area, as you saw in that earlier slides, from the Imperial Palace to Tokyo Station, developments are underway. And beyond that, on the eastern side, developments have already started. And furthermore, we know that there will be further high-rises to be built beyond 2025 is the target date of completion. There could be some delay. 390 meters, close to 400-meter high-rise is to be built on the northern side of Tokyo Station, which would be the culminating point. And should that building, skyscraper, be complete, this is how it's going to look. We are going to see a big space where people will gather, new activities would start. We know that based on our past experience. So northern side of Tokyo Station is finally going to look like that. Now, Nihonbashi area, since the Edo period, this has been the center of Tokyo. And today, there are many buildings under construction. And the colored ones are the ones to be built in the future, to be completed within the next 10 years. In other words, we're talking about the more than doubling of the number of buildings in Nihonbashi area. Nihonbashi, bashi in Japanese mean bridge. So we used to have this wooden bridge replaced by the stone mason bridge. And at the time of the Tokyo Olympics in 1964, the highway was built over it, and this is strongly unpopular. So the plan is to tear this down. And since we're talking about 50, 70 years from the construction, there will be rerouting. And so this is the idea. We see Nihonbashi on the left-hand side, foreground. And the plan is to build a wooden bridge in the original location. And this will be the final picture of Nihonbashi. And so the efforts have already begun to restore the original landscape. Now, this is the Toranomon-Roppongi area, especially in the center of Toranomon. We have Toranomon Hills that was completed last year. And you can see the road from Toranomon toward this way. And for the first time in Japan, we have a building over a road. And with this, the above ground traffic has been reduced. More vehicles driving underground. So the idea is to turn this part into Champs-Élysées of Japan, the pedestrian only. But we don't know how it's going to look, because this is how it looks today. We know that it's wider, but we don't know how it's going to look like. In the case of Champs-Élysées, all of the buildings on both sides are aligned in terms of height. Facade is well aligned, and there are designer brands there. Now, how it's going to look like in 5 years' time, 10 years' time, it's hard to foresee. But we believe that for the time being, this is how it's going to look like. Would it eventually turn into Champs-Élysées or not? Only history will tell. And then what's going to happen to this area? Toranomon Hills. On both sides of Toranomon Hills, sooner or later, there will be two high-rise buildings. So right now there's only one, but in the nearest future, we're going to have a series of high-rise buildings. How about Shibuya area? This is on the western part of Tokyo, one of the important railway terminals by 2025, or at least by 2027. These are all the buildings that are to be completed, so rapid transformation taking place currently. And for this, railway systems, the routes have been changed. This is Ginza Line subway system on the above ground, the elevated area, but there is a major construction underway to put them all underground. And when it's complete, this is how it's going to look like. So on north, east, south, western side, more buildings will be constructed. And in the meantime, this is the Shibuya-gawa River. This is how it looks today. Right after the end of World War II, the common view of rivers were that there will be garbage, smelly, and therefore these were the back alleys. But as the rivers get more clean, this is how it's going to look. It's no longer the back alley, but it's going to be the front. This is where people are going to gather. Now, area management is one momentum that is going on in major cities around the world. And so, in relation to the development of Tokyo, what is happening? This is where all the development projects are, or where the major cores are in Tokyo. And in terms of maintenance, promotion, area-based service, there are several different patterns. And this summarizes these different patterns of these centers, of different centers of Tokyo. And I'd like to talk about four major ones: large-scale development type, build-up area type, or the shared vision, built-up area type, the platform version, or existing area value being leveraged. So there are different patterns to cater to the different characteristics of this region. And a typical example of large-scale development is where we are today, the Roppongi Hills. This Roppongi Hills is a large-scale development type. Area management, safety, security, local assets, making access to the local areas, and eco-friendliness. And more specific examples would be this Bon Odori Festival, where the local residents will participate. And then this is more Western culture, the Halloween parade taking place in Roppongi Hills. Just some of the examples of the activities. And what about the built-up area type of area management? This is for the Otemachi Marunouchi Yurakucho district. And we have many of the blue-chip companies headquartered in this area. And this is not Bonodori, but for example, street furniture discussions, and how do you restore, revive the historical land sites. And in terms of eco-friendliness, this area could be a showcase. So turning the roads into the pedestrian-only areas. And because this area is long, they do have a free-of-charge shuttle bus services. So people can move among those three districts, Morinocho, Demachi, and Yurakcho, free of charge without having to pay anything. And specific physical space is being provided as well. And another example of the built-up area type area management, platform type. This is Nihonbashi District. This has already begun in relation to the traditional Japanese culture. Within the local assets, there is Tokyo Kimono Week event. Edo or Nihonbashi was a commercial district, a very vibrant commercial district during the Edo period. So they are trying to organize the events that are along that historical significance, something that is very peculiar to Nihonbashi in this area management. And Tim Tompkins will talk about Times Square later. So I just wanted to share with you what's happening in Tokyo. And now I'd like to ask Ricky Burdett, Tim Tompkins, and Michael Kimmelman to give us the presentations. Ricky will talk about London, Tim and Michael will talk about New York City in their respective presentations.
ありがとうございました。ではお願いいたします。